Hello, my name is Amna Salimi, and I will be discussing a topic from modern business in comparative perspective, which is called the transnational corporations. This is topic 9 of the subject, and it is very popularly tested every year. It is a very important and interesting topic. So, first of all, what is a transnational corporation? A TNC or a transnational corporation is any firm which has power to control and coordinate its operations and business activities in more than one country. So these organizations, they are basically operating in different parts of the world, in the developing countries and the developed regions. They can have many offices, they can have sub-business units, franchises, factories. Usually, the TNCs from developed countries operate in the developing countries because of the various advantages which they can have. So, talking about advantages, John Dunning, who is a very famous theorist in modern business, who has highlighted the importance of transnational corporations, talks about three major advantages which these organizations they enjoy. Not just their home economies, but the host economies where they go and operate, they enjoy these benefits. So the three advantages, number one is ownership advantage, number two is locational advantages, and number three is internationalization advantages. So when we talk about ownership advantages, this means that exporting, franchising, licensing, this becomes very easy because you are not operating from overseas. You are actually physically present in that country overseas, and you are able to easily export and franchise and license. So it is very beneficial not just for your country, not just for the country from where you came as an organization, as a TNC, but for the host economy as well. Number two, we have locational advantages. Locational advantages means that these TNCs, they will enjoy low transportation costs and cheap labor and cheap raw material, low cost raw material. From the developed countries, everybody knows about Ralph Lauren. So what do? They basically import the textile which they use in their garments, in their factories, from the developed countries. They particularly import this from Philippines, from Indonesia, and from Pakistan as well. So these are a few locational advantages of being a TNC. If you are physically operating in that country, you will enjoy the same cost, the same prices, and if you are from a developed country, that will be even less. Number three, we have internationalization advantages. So when you internationalize or when you transnationalize, the biggest advantage is that you have access to that particular country's market, to the consumer market, and to the technology, to the labor pool, to the managerial talent which that country has to offer to you. So when you internationalize, you can exploit the natural resources, the raw materials of that country. This also helps in creating jobs. So this means that the rate of unemployment in the host economy decreases. And when the rate of unemployment decreases, people have higher incomes and they are able to afford, they are willing and able to buy goods and services. This raises their living standards. And when this happens, then the host economy's, host country's economy, it flourishes and it develops basically. So other than this, the inflation or the macroeconomic issues, they are also in control when you are a TNC because you can have increased productivity. When you are operating in that country where you are getting cheap raw material and labor, your productivity increases because your cost decreases and automatically your productivity it increases. So when your productivity increases, your profitability increases, and the chances of you being highly competitive in the market and achieving the competitive edge, that increases. So moving forward, these TNCs, they bring foreign direct investment with them, which is also called FDI. Inward FDI and outward FDI. I will discuss this in detail. But when they bring FDI with them, this means that the income and economic stability and employment opportunities, these are created in the country. So not just for the host economy, this is also beneficial for the home economy, because all the taxes and when you are a organization, a TNC, you are naturally paying taxes to the country you are operating in. This is going to help them economically, and whatever profits you are earning or you are achieving, you are sending back to your home country. So this is again very good, very beneficial for your home economy as well. Next, the influence in local and global economies also increases if you become a transnational corporation. Now, I'd like to clear something over here. A very common question which is asked is that what is the difference between a multinational enterprise and a transnational corporation? Now, I want to clear this, that there is a very thin line between the two. There is a difference. A company can be both a multinational enterprise, an MNE, or a TNC, a transnational corporations. And some countries are only TNCs and only MNEs. For example, Ernst and Young, it is a multinational, it is not a TNC. However, McDonald's is a TNC. Honda and Toyota are very famous Japanese TNCs. So you see, there is a difference between the two. Multinational enterprise will have one headquarter, and that headquarter will give direction to its sub-business units which are operating around the world. But in a TNC can be location focused or culture focused or continent focused or country focused. It is not important that a TNC will have its headquarters. But it is important that a multinational will have one headquarter, which usually is in the developed countries, and they have their sub-business units in the developing regions. In the Pacific nations, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, China, Korea, and Malaysia, Singapore, as compared to Germany, US, UK. So, those TNCs from the United States, from Germany, from USA, they are operating in the developing countries because of the clear advantages they can achieve, the benefits that they are having. The next thing that we'll talk about is the growth of international economy. The growth of international economy is a reason of the trade and foreign direct investment. When we talk about trade, we are directly talking about the 1980s or the era which is marked by Japanization, because that is the time when growth rates have fluctuated, and post-war period it has experienced or witnessed phenomenal growth. You see, every country cannot produce everything that they need, which is why we have organizations, we have multinationals, we have TNCs, which are catering to the needs and wants of the customers all around the world. So basically, international business, it has been a generator of very high economic growth. The most economic growth that has ever happened, is a reason of international businesses and globalization. Trade, basically imports and exports, these have led to increased globalization, and economies have become interdependent upon each other for whatever they need. And to produce everything, we need to have cheaper raw materials if we want to cut down our costs, and if we want to increase our productivity, we want to increase our profitability. It is very important that we try to cut on costs. So the best way to cut on costs is to actually go and operate or physically be present in a country where the prices and rates are low and where we can get cheap labor. The second thing which has increased the growth of international economy is the FDI. FDI, be it inward or outward, it is the flow of investment and assets and capital and cash flow by the TNCs from one nation to the other. And it grew, FDI, foreign direct investment, it grew at a very high pace, at a very high speed, even more than trade, even more than exports and imports. So the term which is used to indicate total investment which is done by the TNCs in each country, it is called the GFCF, which is gross fixed capital formation. The causes of internationalization basically means the reasons why economies they internationalized, why they globalized, why they internationalized, and the businesses why they decided to have their operations and their business overseas. So this basically all happened because of globalization, and it basically was done to prevent the breakdown of international economic relations. And these nations, including UK, USA, China, Japan, Germany, they signed a series of bilateral contracts, and this agreement was called the General Agreement of Trade and Tariffs. It was signed in 1947. So this agreement basically it helped in a free and open trade uh, with low barriers and with low and less taxes and duties. Also, the trade rules and regulations they were relaxed, they were lowered, they were decreased. And since 1980s, leading economies have liberalized their trade relations and markets and their financial systems as well, including Japan, China, Singapore, Malaysia. These Asian economies have particularly done this, and the role played by US after the World War II, which was the post-war period, is also very popular. And why is it popular? Because it opened up its huge domestic market. USA, it started producing the domestic appliances and machinery which was previously not produced in the United States. Only ammunition and weapons were produced in the factories. So, since that time, TNCs have benefited from the greater levels of political and diplomatic stability. And all of this basically brought ease of communication and transportation, and this reduced the cost of internationalization. And the transactions which are international transactions, their cost was also reduced. So this resulted in TNCs achieving product know-how, market know-how, and managerial best practice. So these were the reasons or causes of internationalization. It was a brief historical background. How did the internationalization or globalization started to occur, and why did the businesses they decided or they felt the need to globalize? Because market trends were very unpredictable, consumer demand was unpredictable, uh, market turbulence was very high. So there was a need to go ahead, there was a need to achieve the competitive edge. Because when organizations they don't uh, the, think on innovating, or they don't think on stabilizing themselves, eventually their practices they start to become obsolete and they start to die out. As an organization, as a firm, they will lack experience, they will lack expertise, their core capabilities and their key competencies, their strategies, their objectives, their mission and their vision primarily, it is going to suffer. So the why we discuss causes of internationalization when we talk about TNCs is because these reasons actually formed the transnational corporations. The transnational corporations emerged as a result of globalization. Next, we will be doing the comparative analysis of different economies of different nations which have the largest TNCs in the world, starting from the USA. USA is basically a biggest transcontinental economy, and it is the world's richest and largest economy, because of which it is a magnet for inward FDI. Every economy, every business, every country wants to invest in US dollars, and these US TNCs, they supply by far the largest amount of outward FDI as well, in the shape of financial aid, capital investments. So these stock of FDI and rankings of the US TNCs are published in The Economist and the Harvard Business Review. These TNCs, they include organizations in the electronics industry, in marketing, branding, fast food restaurants, and vehicles, motor vehicles. And some of the biggest US TNCs include McDonald's, General Motors, General Electric, and Ford, and they have more than 150,000 employees working around the world. So, in comparison to the US TNCs, we'll be talking about Japan, and Japan has globally prominent TNCs. These companies operate in the vehicles and electronics industry. They are very renowned. They are called Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. These TNCs, the Japanese TNCs, they are ranked in terms of their overseas investments, and they have around 250,000 employees working globally. So next up, we'll talk about the UK. UK takes the second place in FDI rankings, in FDI stock rankings, and UK economy is highly dependent upon international businesses, and it has competitive advantage in finance and services. Biggest US TNCs include Vodafone and the Anglo-Dutch business of Royal Dutch Shell Petroleum. It is the biggest TNC in the world from the United Kingdom. So, after discussing the comparative analysis of these important nations, we need to highlight an important aspect of TNCs. You see, TNCs are organizations which come from other countries. When these companies, they come in to operate or to do business in another country, they bring their own organizational culture with them. And particularly because every organization in the modern business, it is very diverse these days, there is a lot of workforce diversity, then the managers and the workers, they will also be diverse, and they will have their own schools of thought and values associated with them. So there sometimes can be clashes among the employees and employers, because you see, there are a lot of nationalities who are working under one roof in pursuit of collective goals, and it can actually become difficult at times to deal with and to manage such a diverse workforce. So you see, cultural mismatch, language barriers, these can actually cause a lot of turbulence, a lot of clashes in the organization. And because of this, the TNCs, they can face challenges while they are operating overseas in other countries. For example, if we have a TNC which is a US TNC or a Chinese TNC, and it operates in Pakistan or India or Bangladesh, then those managers and those TNCs, they will have their own mission and vision, their own goals. However, the workers and people who will be working in these countries, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or any other Asian countries, they will have their own national culture, they will have their own customs and values and beliefs. So it will be challenging but not impossible to manage a diverse workforce of the transnational corporations. So a best manager or a good leader will always try to resolve any disputes, any conflicts, any issues arising from workplace diversity. Other examples of TNCs, they include Google, Total, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Nike, and many more. So basically, TNCs are representatives of competitive advantage of not just their home economy but their host nation as well. In this field, the work of Porter, Dunning, Rugman, and Peter Dicken, particularly, is very popular in not just this topic but this subject. Just like the role of managers and particularly strategic managers, HR managers is very important. They have all these theorists have highlighted the importance of these managers when it comes to managing transnational corporations, because you see these TNCs, they need to have absolutely brilliant strategic managers and human resource managers, because as discussed earlier, the strategies, missions, and vision of the organization has to be very clear. The strategies by the leaders and the managers have to be set accordingly, and the human resource managers must manage the workforce and the employees all around the world or globally, not just in one country. So therefore there is a lot of responsibility on these two managers. Next, we'll talk about the role of state. Role of state in attracting TNCs is also very important, because attracting these TNCs, it can lead to better diplomatic relations and foreign affairs, because generation of government revenue and technological innovation takes place when TNCs come to your country, and this actually is very beneficial for your country, as we have discussed the advantages before. Another concept in this topic is called internalization. This is the exact opposite of internationalization. And in internalization, basically, the transactions, they are conducted within the corporation rather than outside the business or outside the economy or country. Internalization means that your capital, your assets, your investments, they are not being sent or transferred overseas to other countries. This can sometimes be because of a few disadvantages that transnational corporations can face, or the economies which attract these TNCs can face. For example, outflow of wealth is a very big problem, because whatever the TNC is going to generate, whatever profit it is going to make, it is going to send back to its home country. So the outflow of wealth will be very high. And exploitation of labor and resources is another common disadvantage of TNCs, because they can exploit your labor and your resources at a very low price. Just because cheap labor and raw material is available doesn't mean that the rules, regulations, and laws and policies should be overlooked and neglected. But this does happen sometimes, and this is why some companies, they prefer internalizing rather than internationalizing. So this was the discussion on TNCs. It was all content focused, and I hope you liked it. So my next video will be about the past papers of this topic, and what variation is there in the questions of this particular topic. We will discuss it in my next video. Thank you very much for watching.